So this is a romance novel. Hey guys, welcome back. Here is the spoiler talk for the August Book of the Month poll winner, The Vampires of El Norte. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss voting in next month's poll or miss any future spoiler talks. This novel is set in 1840s Mexico at the brink of the Mexican-American War. We follow Nina, the daughter of a wealthy ranch owner, and Nestor, a vaquero, as they navigate the lands trying to avoid the monsters of the war from the opposing side, and also the monsters lurking in the dark. Vampires! Now, one thing to be aware of if you haven't read this novel and you want to, is the author's use of Spanglish in the novel. Now, I knew this would be the case because the author did it as well in The Hacienda, her first book. So the book is in English, but there are quite a few phrases and words that are in Spanish. So personally, I had to download a translator app to translate some of the things in the book to make it make sense while I was reading. I did 3.5 years of Spanish, but I've forgotten all of it. And so most of the time when I was reading it, I was like, what are you saying? I found it easier to download the app and just kind of translate some of the things that I was like, I don't really understand like what you're trying to convey here. For example, there's a lot of mentions of the vaqueros, and this is Spanish for cowboy. So for me, having that small knowledge about what the words translate to made reading and understanding the book a lot easier. Okay, so this first little bit will be spoiler free, so if you're not looking for spoilers, it's still fine. So I think this author writes really beautifully. I thought that when I had read her debut, The Hacienda, I really liked that book, so that made me really excited to read this novel. So with Vampires of El Norte, I loved her use of words and phrases and the emotional impact that her writing had while I was reading it. However, this book is marketed terribly. If you are looking for a horror vampire book, this is not it. This is a straight up romance novel. The aspects of the war and the vampires really took a back seat to the second chance romance aspect of the book. The vast majority of the novel was basically these two main characters just pining after each other. And really thinking back on it, it really feels like there was only like a little handful of like horror-esque-ish action scenes. Personally though, for me, I was completely fine with this. When I was reading it, I was completely entertained by the romance. I mean, I did end up giving the book 5 stars because I really did enjoy reading it, but that's because I'm an extreme romance lover. So for me, it was a welcome surprise. For others, if you're going into this being like, oh, it's gonna be a horror novel, I could see where this book could be a huge disappointment. With that being said, let's dive into the spoilers. So if you haven't read the book yet and you don't want anything spoiled, we will see you next time. If you want spoilers, let's go. The book opens up on 13-year-old Nina and Nestor. Nina is the daughter of a wealthy ranch owner. Nestor lives with his grandmother and uncles and cousins on this ranch, and they work for Nina's family. Now, Nina and Nestor, they are attached at the hip, and they are so adorable. However, Nina's mother does not approve, since basically Nestor's like of a lower class, like his family works for her family. So right in the beginning of the novel, one night Nina and Nestor sneak out and they meet up in the middle of the night, and then Nina is straight up just attacked by a freaking vampire right away, right off the bat. And this thing is nasty sounding. The vampires in this novel are not the romanticized vampires that are typically in books these days. I just have to read this description of this vampire because he is not an Edward Cullen vampire. Okay, this is a bent-legged beast, the likes of which he had never seen before. Its human-like head was a mouthful of teeth. Its face was wrinkled and hairless and mottled gray like the rest of its hide. There were 2 slits where a nose might be. He couldn't see its eyes in the dark, but there were no doubt in his mind that it was looking at him as its aggressive hiss came from its lipless maw of teeth. Definitely not vampires as like we think of them today, where it's like, ooh, sexy man. No, not that at all. This monster attacks Nina. So then Nestor has to carry a mauled Nina back to her house. As you can imagine, it's pure chaos. Her throat is mangled and everybody's like, she's dead. So Nestor, believing that it's all his fault, he flees. The novel moves forward 9 years. Nestor is now 22 and he's been traveling around taking different cowboy jobs at different ranches and just living on his own since he was 13. All of this time, he is with 100% of the belief that Nina is dead, and he's been devastated for 9 years about this. He still constantly thinks of her and he pines after her, you know, things of love stories, etc., etc. It's sad for him, but at the same time, it was pretty precious to read about. Which, you know, I'm like, oh, your pain is so precious. Because obviously knowing that he's gonna find out that she's alive soon, and I was so excited for that moment. But yeah, he's devastated. So Nina, on the other hand, does not really know what happened that night. So she doesn't remember anything. And since Nestor's gone, she has nobody to really tell her what happened because they were the only ones there. So she does have a scar from the attack, but she doesn't know what exactly caused it. Also in her mind, she has no idea why Nestor vanished that night, but she does miss him as badly as he misses her, but she's more angry about it because it felt like he just abandoned her. So in all these years, Nina has been learning how to do like healing, and she's been trying to convince her father that she's a valuable part of the ranch, basically so he doesn't just marry her off. We do learn of this like sickness that has been going around the ranches, and they refer to it as Siska, which translates to shock. And at this point in the story, it's pretty alluded to that this is caused by the same type of monster that attacked Nina. Vampires. Also, the main part of this novel does take place in 1846, which is the start of the Mexican-American War. So that's a large part of the novel as well. So basically, Nina's ranch and the workers, etc., they are going elsewhere in Mexico to help fight the war and defend their land. Nina convinces her father to let her come along with the war cause people as a healer, and her father agrees on the condition that she will marry someone of his choosing when they return and the war is over. Apparently, this whole time, basically everybody but Nina are still in kind of contact with Nestor. He receives a letter from Nina's older brother Felix asking him to come along and join the cause of the war group that's traveling. Okay, so Felix knows that Nestor has been out there this whole time, and he has never said anything to Nina about where Nestor is. I was outraged. And then in turn, Nestor has been keeping in like loose contact with her brother, obviously, and his family with like random letters. But all of these years has passed by and no one has mentioned to Nestor in a letter about how Nina is still alive. So basically, no one knew why he fled the ranch. And then because nobody knew why he fled the ranch, nobody thought to mention in a letter, like, hey, bud, she's still alive, just so you know, and she misses you. So they just had 9 years wasted. See, this shit is romance novel shit. I swear to God, this is not a horror novel. So Nestor and one of his cowboy friends, Beto, go back to the ranch where he grew up, which is also Nina's ranch. They're going to join the war cause. So it's a bit of a homecoming for Nestor. He hasn't seen his family this whole time. Like I said before, they've done like random little letters, but it's a big thing for him to come back. Everybody's very excited. So as soon as Nestor walks in, there's like this world-moving moment where he and Nina's eyes lock from like across the room. And you can like imagine that this is like a moment when like time stops and like everything stops and they connect eyes, and it's like, Nestor basically goes into shock. He like loses it. He goes outside, he throws up, he's losing his shit. So for the past 9 years, he legitimately 100% was like, she is 100% dead. So can you imagine walking into a party and being like, oh, there she is. And so basically he just starts questioning all of his life decisions from the past like 9 years. Now, Nina, on the other hand, is also very shocked to see him. She didn't know that he was coming back, but she knew that he's just been out there doing his thing for 9 years, and she hasn't known where he has been this whole time. So in her mind, he hasn't cared about her this whole time. So her seeing him is more of like an anger shock. So later, Nestor like calms down, collects himself, and goes to like her house to try and like talk to her and be like, hello, I thought you were dead for all these years. But he goes, and she opens the door and she basically just slams it in his face. So definitely foresee some major conversations that need to be had between the two of them throughout the remainder of the novel. Also, Nestor learns that Nina is coming along with everybody for the war cause, and he'll be in charge of keeping her safe. So love that. We're gonna have some nice forced proximity together for the rest of the novel, which again, this is a romance novel. So on the way they go, all heading towards somewhere to meet up with the Mexican army. Nina, of course, is being looked after in shifts by Nestor and his cousins and Beto, his friend. So there was all sorts of like awkwardness between Nina and Nestor. She's obviously still very pissed at him. He's obviously very uncomfortable and doesn't know what to say to make her not be pissed at him. It's very precious, but he's very determined to try and talk to her, which is adorable, of course. We love a sweet man who's fumbly with words. So one night, they're all stopped for the night, and Nina and Nestor are going to the river to fill up their water. On the way there, they see one of the cows that has been traveling with them, one of their cows from their ranch, and it's dead. And it's basically been mauled and sucked dry. Wonder what could have done that? Then Nina and Nestor have a little confrontation about the fact that Nestor left her. She doesn't accept his apology, doesn't quite believe him when he says like, well, I thought you were dead. When they're heading back to the camp, they hear this horrible scream from Beto. And basically Nestor has to relive the night of what happened to Nina, but now with his best friend. So Beto has been attacked by something, and this is the something, the same sort of something that has been attacking the others on the ranches in this area. So none of these characters know that it's a vampire. Nobody knows what is attacking people. Whatever attacked Beto had left this big wound, basically, and it's very similar to the wound that Nina has, or like the scar that she has. So Nina has tended to these types of incidents before. So she gets to fixing this guy's wound, and then she also needs to call his spirit back to his body because like the people who have been attacked by whatever this is, they seem to be in like a state of shock. So like they don't seem alive, like their eyes are like far away, you know? And to do this, Nina has to like say their full name over them while saying like regresa, regresa. So basically calling their soul back to their body. So she's able to successfully bring Beto back, and then Nestor tells her like, that's exactly what happened to you. You seem dead just like he did, basically being like, see, it's weird, right? So I think slowly she's realizing like why Nestor ran away, but she's still mad. I'm just telling you about all like the tea of like their drama. I feel like the main majority of this book is just the romance aspect and the drama between the romance. It was just way more prevalent than anything else in this book. So the group is traveling, they get to the meeting spot with the rest of the army, and basically it turns into a shit show. To stay alive, Nina needs to flee, because a battle starts. She needs to flee the battle, and she goes with Nestor for protection. So they're fleeing the battle site. As they're fleeing, they come across some vampires. Here's some more vampires. And they're feeding on the dead members of the Mexican army. They're these big, nasty creatures, and naturally, Nina and Nestor are horrified, and they're like, the fuck? Did you just see that? Because this is the first time that they've, like, seen these things, like, right there. They're like doing their thing. And so they realize that like this is what has been attacking the people back at the ranches and what's been causing like the state of shock. So Nina's like, well, I need to go back to the ranch so I can tell everybody what is causing this mysterious illness, like so everybody can take precautions. So her and Nestor decide to turn around and just head back home. So at this point, we're halfway through the novel. Basically, nothing has happened plot-wise. So we spent days going all the way to this place, and now we're gonna spend days going all the way back home. But at the same time, I was like, but there's gonna be some forced proximity between these characters, so, I mean, I love that. So, unsurprisingly, the next half of the book, we have nothing but back and forth of these two main characters basically just coming back together. And in addition to their hurt, like their feelings being hurt, they're also very aware of the fact that she is the ranch owner's eldest daughter, and he is just this poor, lowly, like traveling cowboy. We keep going in circles throughout the whole rest of the novel regarding those conflicts, and this is the majority of the second half of the book. There is another vampire sighting. This comes at a time when they stop to rest at this like a little abandoned like cabin for the night, and apparently a vampire has been following them the whole way. Weirdly, it was like covered in the skin of one of the like opposing soldiers, and then it like ripped out of the skin before attacking them. During this fight, we learned that bullets don't do shit to defend against vampires. The only way to kill these vampires are beheading, which Nina does because with a machete, because Nestor gets thrown to the ground and he gets injured. But don't worry, Nina fixes him all up. Also, along with these travelers, they come across other people who are also traveling because it's the 1800s. They're all sharing stories across the campfire, you know, ghost stories. And so we learn about these like other stories of these creatures. So like, it's like a thing. That's that. We're already leading into the 75% mark of the book. So we've had like 5 sightings of the vampires of this book that's called Vampires of El Norte. And we're at the 75% mark, and this is now like only the 6th time that like vampires are like coming back into the novel. Not gonna lie, I expected the entire novel to be filled, every single chapter full of vampires, but it wasn't. So we have another sighting of the vampires. Basically, Nestor and Nina are almost back home to her ranch, and they cross paths with like this large group of the opposing side's soldiers transporting the vampires. Like they're all chained up and like they're like cattle almost. And Nestor and Nina are like, what the fuck is going on? Nina is wondering if the opposing side of the war is like setting the vampires loose on the people. Like, is this where they've been coming from? Like, have they been captured and now they're being used as like weapons against the landowners? So in the author's note in the back of the book, she does expand on how back in like the 50s or so, like the invaders on Mexican land were referred to as vampires because they come in and they steal the land, they suck it dry. And I loved how in the novel she took the idea of the history of the real like Yankees being referred to as vampires, and in the novel having the Yankees actually using the vampires to achieve their goals. I feel like I've been like harsh on this novel because there weren't enough vampires. But like I said, I gave this novel 5 stars. I legitimately really liked it. Back to the story. So they spend the last night in a cave, and Nestor basically confesses his love to her. And he says how he wants to be with Nina and how they can make it work despite their class differences. And then it's heavily implied that they have sex, which this is a straight up a romance novel, so saw that coming. And we have another vampire sighting, which a vampire is like outside of their cave, but we've been learning that salt repels the vampires, and so they have salt in front of the cave, and so that keeps the vampires away. So the salt is very important. Remember the salt. So we get back to the ranch, and everyone is all happy that Nina's back, but her family is concerned that she was escorted home alone by Nestor. How scandalous, because of their class differences. Her mom's all pissed off. Her mom's all, this is unacceptable. And so Nina's father flips out, and then he banishes Nestor from the estate. During their confrontation, Nina said nothing. So Nestor just like awkwardly left. But then that same night, Nestor ends up coming back to the ranch because he has the realization of, no, he needs to fight for Nina. And it was a good thing that he went back too, because their estate was being attacked. Shifting to Nina's point of view, she knew that the Yankees had brought vampires with them during their attack because obviously they saw them. So whenever she was around vampires, like anytime throughout the book, her old scar would burn, you know, like Harry Potter. Voldemort, no! So she gives her mother and sister and cousins salt to line the doorways of the house, and then she sets out into the night to try and find where the vampires are being held at. She finds these vampires all chained up on the edge of the forest with this enemy watching them. She fucking shoots this guy, and then she steals his keys and plans to release the vampires and let them like escape these captors. So she gets the keys from the guy that she shot, and since she has this vampire scar, she almost has like a connection with the vampires, and she's felt this before in the novel. They're described as like not having eyes, but like she can like sense them like looking at her. So basically she has a connection with these vampires. So there are 6 of them all chained up, and she tells them she won't hurt them if when she releases them, they leave and they don't like attack her family and her ranch. So that's what she does. She's releasing them and they're just leaving. They're like, cool, bye. She gets to the last vampire and something like shifts. Like, so the vampire, she's unchaining it, and it sees that the soldier behind her is like coming at her. And so the vampire like shoves her out of the way, and then he mauls the soldier, and then he disappears into the forest. So Nina is injured by a vampire again, even though this time he was kind of protecting her, getting her out of the way of that mean soldier that was sneaking up behind her. But don't worry, Nestor was right there at the perfect moment to carry her back to the house, just like he did at the beginning of the novel when they were kids. So we're coming full circle here. So this time it was nice. He didn't run like the first time when she was injured. He stays and she gets healed. And then they have this sweet moment of reconciliation. By the way, Nina asks him to marry her, which I was just saying in the last spoiler talk how I want more of this, but I would love to have more marriage proposals from women in books. I think that would be lovely. You don't always get what you want. But after that, Nina basically tells her father, like, you can accept this or I'll just leave. Nina's parents didn't accept it. So at this point, we're like, the novel's like done, and we're in the epilogue, and Nina and Nestor marry, and Nina's parents are the only ones who don't attend. I was like, whoa, okay, they really don't support this. But basically the ending is happy for them. Nina and Nestor are living their own lives. Nestor has bought them some land, and the ending was very sweet, and they seemed very happy. So it was a happy ending to our romance novel. This was not the horror vampire historical fiction book I was expecting. As I've said, the horror was barely there, in my opinion. I mean, we barely saw any vampires, and when we did, nothing really happened to the characters that interacted with the vampires. On the other hand, this was a fantastic romance novel. I think this book got such a disservice to its marketing by saying it was horror instead of historical romance, with maybe like a hint of horror paranormal. I could definitely see where if somebody went into this book with how it was marketed, being extremely disappointed. But for me, someone who prefers heavy romance aspects in my books, I did find the book to be very lovely. I adored the back and forth when it came to the characters' feelings. I loved the situations that they were thrown into that made them come together. Lastly, I loved the gushy, happy ending of them getting what they both wanted, which was just to be together. So basically, we got this resolution for the love story, but the remainder of the novel, the vampire aspect, the historical aspect with like the war and everything, it basically just ended with being like, yep, those things just kind of happened. It's very, very strange the way that this book was marketed. I do not understand why it was marketed as horror, like historical. I don't understand why it wasn't marketed as a romance novel. It's so weird. I don't even understand. So with the weirdness of how this was marketed, I am very, very curious to know, did you like this book? Did you go into it being like, expecting one thing and getting something completely different? Are you completely disappointed because it wasn't as it was advertised? Or are you happy because it ended up being really good? I'm just very, very curious to know, like, what did you actually think when you got done reading this book? Or did you not even keep reading it because you were like, this is not what was advertised? Personally, for me, it was a 5-star read because I love the romance aspect. So of course, let me know what you thought of the book in the comments down below. That's it for me today though, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and we'll see you next time. Bye.